All right, guys, we are live. So Ali's just setting up. He's just moving somewhere quieter. But yeah, we fixed the tech issues, so we should be good to go. Didn't want to keep you guys waiting much longer. I have no idea whether it's going to be a good debate or not. He reached out to me, said he wants to debate me after seeing my debate with Pastor Aiden. So yeah, we can see how it goes. He says he's a more reasonable religious person. We'll see about that. But yeah, I don't know. We won't go for too long. Probably go for like 45 minutes to an hour. Yeah, it should be a good debate. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Sometimes I go into these things, I have no idea what's going to happen. So those are always fun as well. Like last night, I knew exactly what was going to happen, what the arguments I was going to make. Tonight, I had no idea. So it can be even more fun that way. Yeah, so should be a good time. All right, Ali, can you hear me? Because I cannot hear you, my man.
Sorry, I muted my mic.
Okay.
There we go.
You can hear me?
I can.
All right, cool. Yeah, man. So, all right. So you emailed me. You said you want to have a little debate. So maybe you should kick it off. Like, give your take on what you want to discuss.
Yeah, totally. So I just preface it. I just want to say, like, what sparked this was you speaking with Pastor Aiden, and I'm not like in that guy's camp. I would say I'm more of a normal Christian, but I just saw that you were very cordial, and you were pretty much like really wanting to reason through it with him, and he wasn't wanting to do the same. So I'm like, man, if this guy talked to somebody who was like instantly trying to provide a rational basis for what they believe for Christianity in particular, it'd be such an awesome. That's what I wanted.
Cool.
But I want to approach it, if you don't mind, just from the vantage point of, let's say we met on the street, and then I would have a conversation with you, because that's what I really would want to make this more so a conversation, and we can touch all
you're having a massive
topics that I mentioned.
Ali, you're having a massive lag. Let's just quickly fix that because it's lagging really, really bad. Are you close to your Wi-Fi router? Because it's lagging really bad. All right. But yeah, like I said, guys, we're not going to go for too long tonight. Should be.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah, go ahead. Do your thing. Do you mean Evangelist? I guess I misspelled that. I'll have to. I guess I combined Evangelist with Avenger, and I came up with that.
I like that. I thought it was pretty clever.
Yeah, it was an pure accident. It seems to be okay for now, but let's see how it goes.
Okay.
So you're saying something about
area.
Okay. You're saying
I was
something
just saying
about
that I wanted to talk to you like I met you on the street. I want to have a conversation with you, and we can touch all those subjects as we progress through the conversation, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so what do you think happens after we die?
What do I think happens when we die? I don't know, honestly. It could be that we just disappear into nothingness. It could be that there's a heaven. It could be that it's something that none of us know. I have no idea what happens after we die. No one really knows because no one's ever really been dead.
Do you think so? Is it your position that nobody can know? It's not possible.
It might be possible at some point in the future to know with some kind of crazy new technology that I haven't seen. But at this point in time, no one really knows.
How do you know that?
Because there's no empirical evidence for any of the claims that any religion makes.
Like you can't like physically measure God. You can't find him on a mountain. You can't.
Yeah,
like,
there's no like physical location for heaven or hell. There's no like it's purely based in faith. And sometimes faith can be correct, right? So I'm not saying that you guys are wrong by saying you believe in heaven. My position is I don't know, which is why I'm agnostic. You could be right. The atheist could be right. The Buddhist could be right, and we just all get reincarnated. We don't know.
So I would say that your presupposition here is that unless you can see it, unless you can physically observe it, you can't know it.
No, I'm just saying for me to believe something, I would need to see some kind of empirical evidence for it.
Right. For you to believe something is true, you need to be able to see it.
Not necessarily see it. I would need to see empirical evidence. For example, I can't see the fact that there's bacteria. I can't see bacteria, right, with my eye. But there is a lot of empirical evidence for why bacteria exists. There's been a lot of experiments that have been conducted. So, yeah, it would have to be any form of empiricism.
So you can see bacteria, though. So that's not really like the best analogy. So how about like electrons or atoms or quarks.
Yeah, something
These
along
are
the-
like
yeah.
yeah. So I actually drew a chart for you, which I think is really helpful. Do you mind if I quickly just grab it?
Yeah,
I think
go
it's
ahead.
important for me to make my point. Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
I'm very proud of this chart. Okay, so
Let's see the chart.
on the left-hand side, you see observation. That's what we see. On the right-hand side, you see theory. That's an inference that we make. It's an explanation, as you can see down here. So a lot of science is simply looking at the objective data, which is right here. This is objective data. Nobody disputes it. It's verifiable.
Yes.
But here, it's an inference that we make, and a lot of science is in this category.
Sure.
Like you can't observe electrons. Okay, you get my point. So a lot of what you would say that you believe is not based off of pure empirical data. So my point here is, if you're going to judge religion, if you're going to judge spirituality and God, be consistent and don't say, well, if you're trying to prove God to me, you got to be able to put it right in front of my face so I can touch it and see it. Is that fair?
No, you would just have to give me some kind of empirical evidence.
Well, it wouldn't be empirical. Like this is the
the thing is with the chart you drew. So, for example, evolution, right? So the empirical evidence was for evolution is we have a whole bunch of fossil records. We have the observations Darwin made when he went to that island. So we have a whole bunch of things that we can observe, like all the scientists who study this stuff.
No, you cannot observe it.
Versus with religion, there's really just a book that was written.
So I would propose to you that even from a scientific point of view, you cannot observe the macroevolution of fish to monkeys to you cannot observe speciation. You can only
you can see the fossil evidence.
Right. All you see is the fossils, but you see that the explanation or the inference that you make is not something that you see. It's something you infer. It's a hypothesis. It's like, well, how did it get here? Well, this is a good explanation. This is how it might have come about. It's not actually something you see. And I think this is very crucial because I could make the same argument using the fossil data and argue for creationism. And it would be a similar sort of explanation and inference for the data that we see. Same thing with...
So I was just quickly Googling this just to see, and here's an interesting article. So the question is, can evolution be observed and therefore proven? Absolutely. These days, there are many ways to observe evolution in real time. The best example I'm aware of is beautifully visualized adaptive evolution bacteria along a gradient of antibiotic concentration on a megaplate by the Quincy Laboratory at Harvard Medical School. So there are ways that it can be observed, and there's experiments that can be done to prove it.
No, it's not the case. Like I'll tell you for a fact what Darwin observed and what anybody in the world has ever observed about evolution is seeing species change within their particular gene pool. So finches get larger beaks, smaller beaks, birds change colors, moths, all this stuff. They never ever see a insect turn into a reptile or a reptile
because
turn into a
evolution doesn't
bird.
work that way. It takes millions of years.
And that's your explanation, right? You're like, well, we see things changing. We see fossils of different animals. It must be the case because I don't believe in God. It must be the case that happened.
Well, it's not just my observation. It's the observation of every single scientist.
Yeah, I mean, after Darwin, right? Like science is changing. It's based off of. So here's a cool, interesting point. Science is based off a philosophy of science. When the evolutionist looks at the fossil record, they're using their assumption of naturalism, their assumption of atheism, to conclude that the way this process, that these fossils appeared, was through millions and millions of years of death and evolution. That's one way to take a look at it. The other way you could explain it, the way you could infer it, is by saying this is the product of God's creation, and this is the leftovers of a flood. Now, that's not what I want to spend our time talking about here.
Well, I just want to quickly read this because I think it's interesting. 5 types of evidence for evolution are discussed in this section: ancient organisms, remains, fossil layer similarities among organisms alive today, similarities in DNA, and similarities in embryos. So here we have, a nice little chart here. So yeah, you would have to, if you want me to believe in, God, you'd have to provide something along the lines of that, some kind of empiricism.
But notice, Alex, notice the logical fallacy you're falling for. This argument here is saying that because these parts look the same, because they have similar structures, that therefore they must have originated from the same ancestor. That's the argument here. It's a logical fallacy. Just because they are the same, they look the same, and they have similar structures, it does not therefore follow that they arose from a similar common ancestor. It could be also just as likely that God created animals with a particular biology. He gave everything eyes. He gave everything hands. He gave everything, stomachs, digestion, etc. So this is a inference.
I don't think if it's even closely as likely. I think if it was closely as likely, there would be a lot of scientific evidence. People will be proposing this theory, but every single serious scientist on the planet believes in evolution. There's been countless and countless evidence. So yeah, it's not even close to as likely. What I am doing is relying on empiricism to come up to something, or at the very least, trusting in science.
Have you ever listened to a creationist before?
Yeah, a while ago. I mean, I'm familiar.
You ever read a book by a creationist?
No, I have not read any book by creationists.
So you haven't done your research, which is fine. I'm not blaming you, but you haven't done your research. You haven't read academic books by PhD. Like one guy. Okay, so one guy, his name's Jason Lisle. He wrote a book called Ultimate Proof of Creation. He's a PhD in astrophysics from the University of Cambridge, or Colorado.
Sorry, what was his name again?
Jason Lisle, Lisle. There's another guy, Michael Behe. He's also a PhD in something, microbiology, I think. I can list for you various guys who've written academic papers.
Yeah, anyone can write an academic paper, but I look for scientific consensus, and 99.9% of the scientific community believes that evolution is real, right? So there's always going to be someone. There's always going to be someone who's going to have a contrary theory. But the way science works is by the process of consensus, right? So someone writes a paper, other scientists peer review.
Are you sure it's consensus? Are you sure that's the answer?
Generally speaking, they look for like a.
Has science ever had a consensus that was wrong?
I'm sure there has, yeah.
So consensus can't be the determining factor, right?
No, it can be. I mean, if you can present new evidence. It
can be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the determining factor, right?
Yeah, but you would have to present some kind of better evidence than there's for evolution. Look, if you present to me like a video of you like FaceTiming with God or some kind of like legit empirical evidence, then I'd be willing to change my theory. But given the evidence that exists and given the evidence that we have,
can I just say
the chart is not going to convince me.
The point I wrote this up was because you keep asking for empirical evidence, and that's on this side of the chart. That's the physical world. You get empirical evidence. But I'm going to argue with you.
But you have none of that
on this side.
For God.
Sorry?
You have nothing observable that proves the existence of God.
Just like there's nothing observable about electrons or atoms. Just like there's nothing observable about moral laws. Just like there's nothing observable about the laws of logic or numbers.
Well, moral laws is something different. When you're talking about electrons, there's experiments that can be conducted to measure this stuff.
But you can't see them. You only see the data. You only see the result of their activity. You don't see the electron itself. That's my point.
But there's absolutely nothing, no experiment that can be done to prove God. Zero experiments, unless there is one I don't know about.
Well,
but there's no experiment.
I propose this is an experiment.
There's no physical data. It's pure faith. But that chart is not an experiment.
Well, the experiment is this. So I want to make an analogy here. Just like you see the particular, let's say, like workings of a scientific theory, like let's say the electrons or atoms, right? We do experiments and we see, what explains this physical phenomena of this particular set of data? Well, it must be these things called electrons and protons, and then we create a system, and the system explains the particular set of data, right? I propose that the two main things that I think are the best arguments for God is one is the creation, it's the world that we live in, and number two, it's the moral intuition that we all possess. I believe that those two things, when you ask yourself, what's the best explanation for these things, that the answer of God and his creative agency is the best answer. So that's
Yeah.
my evidence to you.
Yeah, so those two things you mentioned again. So the first one, creation of the universe. We know that Earth is created, right? But we don't know who was created by. The scientific theory is that it was, created as a result of, I believe it was something with, I don't know, something along the lines of it followed after the Big Bang. I think there was a star, or something like that. The sun was created.
The gases, bunch of gases
Yeah,
come together in a big rock.
That's the scientific. So you're just saying there's an Earth, but that can be easily explained by the scientific answer. The second one is the moral code we have. Well, first of all, not every person has a moral code. There's serial killers and psychopaths out there, so we weren't all born with the same moral code. There's also quite often differences, even amongst like decent human beings, about what is right, what is wrong. I believe that more likely we just evolved as a species to have a certain set of morality. Otherwise, we would have wiped ourselves off the planet if we were all psychopaths.
So your morality right now is just an evolved morality. Is that right?
It's a combination of my genetics and my life experiences. Yeah.
So it could be different.
What do you mean?
Like you could believe something totally opposite to what you believe right now, and it'd be totally okay. It's just arbitrary.
Depends on how you define okay.
Well, certain things you believe are morally wrong today, but if you were born 50 years ago, you'd believe that they were okay, or the opposite. Something's good today, but it was wrong yesterday.
There's a reason why 300 years ago most people were pro-slavery, and now every single person is against slavery. So yes, to some extent, our sense of right and wrong, it depends on the time we live in.
Sure. So, but no one was actually right or wrong. Either one was okay.
Well, again, in my opinion, slavery is wrong, right? But I'm sure those people 300 years ago had their own theory why it was okay.
But why would you say
and
that?
Maybe 200 years ago, we will think that some of the stuff we're doing now is wrong. Maybe we'll think, wow, we actually had homeless people living on the street. We had people starving. How were those people in 2023 letting human beings starve? These people were so immoral. Oh my God, we were letting 50,000 people a year die from a lack of healthcare. These people were crazy. So it is entirely conceivable that 200 years ago, some of the stuff that we think is right today is going to be considered wrong.
Sure, and I somewhat agree with you there. But my question to you is, let's just talk about one assumption, right? The significance of human life. Do you believe that is something that is arbitrary or relative? That the value of human life. Let's just start with that.
What exactly do you mean by that? Can you explain that question?
Do you believe that it is wrong to transgress against or harm or unjustly, let's say, hurt a human person?
I personally believe that is extremely wrong. But there are people on this planet who do not believe that. But I personally believe
fine. There's people that believe whatever, right? Like, but the point is not what do people believe; it's the truth of the matter. Either it's the case that human life has value, and therefore it's wrong to harm it, to degrade it. Either it's that case, or human life does not have value. It's just flesh and bone. It's just cells. It's just atoms, and there's no imperative to treat it any particular way. It's one of two camps. And don't just tell me, well, I believe this, or I believe that we have life, but some people don't believe it. But my question to you is, what do you believe is the case? Is it in actuality that there is value to human life, or is it merely just your fantastical belief, your philosophical, just this is what you like to think?
Well, again, I personally, and you're not going to like this answer, but that is the real answer. I personally believe that it is, of course, that there's value to human life. But again, there are some people who don't believe that, because as a set of how I grew up, how I was raised, my DNA. I'm not a psychopath. I'm not a sociopath. I mean, I'm sure there are many reasons for why. But again, it's a combination of nature and nurture. Why I evolved to have the same set of morality that I do. It's entirely conceivable that instead of having a great parents who loved me and nurtured me, I had a bunch of sociopaths who abused me and I was raped and shit like that. That I could have a totally different view on morality. And instead of thinking that like you should never harm other people, I could be like a burglar or something like that, or a bad person, right?
And do you think that's it's? I guess what I'm trying to ask you is, you clearly have a standard for yourself, and then I
Right.
hear you say, well, the reason I have this standard is because of my DNA, my upbringing, etc. So are you saying that your standard is essentially meaningless? Might not be the best word, but is subjective? I guess that's what you're trying to say. You're trying to say, I believe my subjective standard. Is that fair?
Well, I think that's it is. Okay, so
Oh,
the answer is this: I think that most people have some universal set of morality. Most people think that murder is bad, that stealing is bad, that generally speaking, even lying is bad. So we, generally speaking, a large part of our population involved to have similar morality issues. But of course, there are some differences, that even good people will have. But a small percentage of people did not evolve to have those set of morality. So there are some universal things.
that's a red herring. I don't.
There's
It doesn't matter.
There are some universal things we evolved to have, just like we all generally evolved to have two arms. But there's some people out there who have one arm, right? So yeah, that's kind of my position.
Okay, so morality's evolved, right? But now, having recognized that, though, you're standing, like, you're seeing yourself objectively in this conversation. You're saying, hey, I'm a person who has subjective morality. This is just what I believe. Does that not then follow that when you see someone acting according to their own subjective morality, the Hitlers of the world, the rapists of the world, those who are doing what they see fit because it benefits them, they're the strongest, they're taking advantage of the weaker, and that's how they want to live? From your perspective, from your position, if all morality is subjective, you have no standard or authority claim to condemn them or to say that they're actually wrong, because they're only wrong from your subjective point of view, which you should recognize it's exactly that. It's subjective. There's no objective reality to the murderer's actions. There's no objective reality to the rapist's actions.
There's objective reality to a murder. So if someone murders someone, it is objective reality that person died. But when it comes to ethics, I don't believe there's objective ethics. I think it's subjective. It depends on your culture, your upbringing, all that. So if I see a murder, I will personally condemn that person, right? But just because I condemn that person doesn't make it objective ethics. So yeah,
I would say the only reason you condemn it is because you feel that you can't help yourself but feel that it is objectively wrong. That's my proposition to you. You're not acting consistently if you decide to impose your morality onto that person by stopping that person.
Well, I don't oppose my morality on anyone. So that's like
you would if you saw someone about to harm another human being. I would hope that you impose your morality onto them and stop them, restrain them.
I would call the police, because that's the law. Yeah.
Yeah, same idea. You're using a means to accomplish the same end. You're calling the police to restrain this person,
right? Because I personally believe it is wrong. Yeah.
But that's my point, Alex. If you're saying that your belief is simply a subjective opinion, it's the same thing as saying, hey, you need to eat vanilla ice cream because I like vanilla ice cream. It's a preference. It's an opinion. That's all it is. If you reduce it down to a subjective feeling that you have just because of the way you were raised.
Yeah, I think that it could be like if someone comes to Miami and asks me for food recommendations, like, hey, this restaurant is great. Mm-hmm. But and a lot of people will think that restaurant is great. But there may be some people who don't like it. It's not objective that restaurant has good food, right? It is my personal opinion. So this is the same thing here. It's no different.
Good. I'm glad we agree on that. Now, my perspective is, believing in God, believing in Jesus Christ, I have a basis. I have an objective standard to claim that the person who takes human life, who harms human life unjustly, is objectively wrong. And not only they're objectively wrong, they're sinning, they're also going to be held accountable for what they do. I can act consistently, and I would just say to you that you're acting inconsistent. You generally act inconsistently when you think that someone else is wrong. When you act that's showing that someone else is wrong, you're being inconsistent with what you claim to believe.
No, that's one evidence. I act on my values and my beliefs, right? But so, like, one of the values I have, for example, is let me try to give you a good analogy. I don't know that one of the values I have is that you should take really good care of your body. You should go to the gym. You should eat healthy. That's one of the values I have, right? And so when people come to me for advice, I will say, hey, that's what I believe in. If I see someone being a fat slob, I'll probably condemn that, right? Or at least I'll make like a little snarky comment. But again, that is just set on my beliefs. This is no different. So yeah, I will always act on what I personally believe and what I value. But there's some people who don't care about living until the 80. They just want to have as much fun as possible until they're 45, 50. Right. So that is their opinion. Now, I think that opinion is incorrect. But again, it's all subjective. It's all based on my values.
And I would say that you have to force yourself to tell yourself that it's subjective. I would claim to you that everybody that's listening to this stream most of the time acts as if their moral predispositions are factual. That if someone's doing something that's repulsive, that's horrible on the news, whatever, there's a guttural reaction to that, saying that that's wrong. When someone's child dies, is murdered, that's wrong. Your spouse is
it's based on their own. It's based on their own beliefs and their own values.
Yeah, but so you're rewriting the experience. You're saying, hey, I know you feel like this is wrong, but just remember, it's just your subjective experience. It's just your subjective belief.
Why would I do that? If I think something is wrong,
I'm not saying you would actually do that. I'm just saying if you were consistent, you would say to someone, hey, don't feel bad that someone offended your loved one or hurt this other person across the street. They were just doing what they thought was okay, what they thought was good in the moment.
No, again, because even though they think it's right, I personally believe it's wrong, and that's enough for me to condemn.
But your personal belief is just a preference, just a flavor. Why are you imposing your flavor? Why are you looking at your flavor as like the supreme flavor, right? What doesn't it make sense? Why are you looking at your own?
Total sense. I don't know how you're like kind of struggling with this, but yeah, because again, it's the beliefs and values I have formed as a result of my genetics and my life experience. And yeah, I'm not running around imposing my values on people, but there's certain values and beliefs that I have so that I live by. Right? I don't need that to be objective. Okay, it's not objective that everyone should eat a paleo diet and go to the gym 5 times a week. That is not objective. That's not an objective way you have to live your life. That is subjective, right? But that is personally how I believe I need to live my life, and I do that. I don't need for it to be objective that every person should work out 5 times a week. I don't need to be objective that people
I wouldn't classify those sort of things as things that fall into the category of what would be objective moral laws. But I would say things like the value of human life, whether one should murder, whether just basic things: cheating, lying, defrauding somebody, dishonoring your parents, sexual immorality. Those things have objectivity to them. And as a Christian, I would say it's rooted in who God is and who we are. Okay. We are created by God.
Let me pose a question like this: do you think sex outside of wedlock is wrong?
Sex out of marriage?
Yeah, outside, like having sex before you get married.
Yeah.
You think it's wrong, right?
Right. The Bible says it's wrong.
Okay, I don't think it's wrong. Who's right?
I am.
How?
Because I have God's authority.
But I believe God doesn't exist. I believe it's a fairy tale.
Your belief doesn't change reality.
But there's no empirical proof for God. This is just something that you believe.
There's no there's no empirical proof for atoms. There's no empirical proof for God, but there is evidence for God that I believe is pretty manifest if you want to see it, you'll see it.
So far, the only evidence you've given me for God is the fact that Earth exists, which again could be easily explained by many other things. The other evidence you gave me is morality, which we're not even agreeing on. Like you're saying, it's objective. I think it's subjective. And the sex before marriage is a perfect example. There's a big part of the population that thinks it's totally okay to have sex before marriage, and there's part of the population who thinks it's wrong, right? Like you, right? And one of us isn't right or another. You would probably condemn someone, or at the very least, in your mind, condemn someone who's having a lot of sex before marriage. I would not, because we have different values.
Well, I'm not condemning anybody. It's not my job to condemn someone. God's going to judge. But just because you're going back to like majority argument. Like majority of people say this. Doesn't matter. The majority or minority doesn't reflect the truth of the claim, right? So we can move on from the moral intuition. I think I made my point. And
no offense, but I really don't think you made your point. Like I've never really had I don't know how like you're not acknowledging that like ethics and values and morality can be subjective. Like the slavery.
Okay, so let me just summarize my point.
The slavery thing is like a perfect example.
So my I will give my point in one sentence, right?
Okay.
For you, if you claim that morality is subjective, you are inconsistent in the feelings of like what you call like anger or criticism of anybody else's morality. If you ever criticize anyone else's morality, having claimed that morality is subjective, you're acting inconsistently. That's
No,
my
no,
point.
I would criticize people's lifestyles. I don't think your lifestyle is also objective, right? There's no objective for how much someone should go to the gym. There's no objective about whether you should be a simp in a relationship and be your girlfriend's bitch or actually be a man. That again, that
I
is
think there's something
that
objective
comes down to
about that.
preference.
I
Okay.
think actually
Well, so I
I'll
would criticize a whole bunch of things that are subjective based on my own logic and my own reasoning. That's not crazy. You keep saying that's inconsistent, but just saying that doesn't make it true.
Is it so? I guess let me use an analogy. Would you say that it's inconsistent for someone who really likes chocolate flavored ice cream to criticize people for liking vanilla? Does that seem like it's a little wrong to
Well,
do
the
so?
reason you wouldn't do that is because there's no harm in someone doing eating vanilla, right? Versus
Oh, interesting.
with
Is
versus
harm
with
wrong?
I personally believe it is, yeah. But there's
But
no that's
again,
why
that's just your flavor, right?
no, I think there's a difference between preferences where there's no negative consequences and preferences and values that do cause negative consequences. So again,
Interesting.
someone like not working out and being fat is going to cause one for them to die younger, two for there to be more burden in the medical system. So there's practical consequences to that. There's no practical consequences to someone choosing chocolate or vanilla. So
Okay, okay, I like that.
therefore, I would not criticize it. But like for example, there are some foods that I think are disgusting, right? So even though I don't think it's right or wrong, but if someone's eating something, I'll be like, ew, that's gross, right? Because that's just I personally find it gross, but some people don't.
Yeah, so I like that you referred it back to negative consequences. You're kind of assuming these things are bad by using that language. You're saying there's some consequences that are inane, they're meaningless, whether you like one ice cream or another, but whether you like to murder or not, there's kind of different set of consequences. And you're saying for murdering, that those set of consequences are bad, right?
Yeah, because I believe that the loss of a human being, an innocent human being, is wrong. That is my belief.
And that's an opinion, right?
Yeah, it is an opinion at the end of the day.
Which is a preference. Same thing, right? Opinion,
Yes,
preference.
you can say that. I have a preference that innocent people don't die.
Okay. That's my point to you is that's like having a particular flavor of ice cream. It's just as meaningless.
No, it's not. There's a massive difference because okay, if we're following this logic, because with the vanilla ice cream, I don't have there's no observable negative consequences, even if it is my preference, right? Versus with the murder thing, there is. So I would be way more
Why are
inclined to
you
condemn
assuming that a
something
murder is a negative consequence?
because based on my own morality, I think that
You're reasoning in a circle here. Well, it's a negative consequence because I think it's a negative consequence.
right, based on my belief, because I
Yeah,
believe
so
that human life
you're
has
reasoning in a circle. I asked you why it's bad, and you're saying, well, because I think it's bad.
no, I'm saying it is bad because a person is going to be murdered. Why is it bad that if a person is murdered? Because
Yeah.
I personally believe that the loss of human life, especially innocent life, is a bad thing. It's a
And
simple
that's
as
just
that.
your flavor, right? That's just your preference. This is your ice cream flavor.
No, there's a big difference in those two. With the ice cream thing, I don't have any belief of any preference of negative consequences. That's the difference.
Right. But that's why we're using an analogy. Like if someone believed that chocolate was like really a good flavor, and they would be very wrong. We would say that they're wrong for criticizing someone who believes in vanilla, but because we think, hey, it's a meaningless. It's just whether you like one flavor or another.
They would be wrong because the critical people say, hey, he's not hurting anyone. That's just his preference. Versus with something like murder, it's like, whoa, there's someone being hurt, which is why we have a massive debate about, like, for
But
example,
that's just your belief, dude. That's just your
wait, let me just finish.
flavor.
Which is why we have a massive debate about legalizing drugs, because some people are saying, well, drugs are a victimless crime, and some people are saying, well, you're kind of harming society as a whole, which is why, like, drugs is in the gray versus murder is kind of black, and like ice cream is kind of white, right? So we have a lot of discussions around morality and what is, but the general way, vast majority of people look at, like, whether you should express your values and preferences or not is whether there's some kind of harm being done. With ice cream, there's no harm being done that I can observe. With murder, there is.
And that's just your subjective preference. That's just your flavor. That's exactly the point I'm trying to
I
make.
have a preference that innocent people don't die.
Right. And that is your flavor of ice cream. That's just your subjective opinion, which is why I'm making the analogy. So
It
you're
is.
just answering the analogy with your own subjective
It
opinion, which you're making my point.
It is my subjective opinion, but it's not similar to ice cream because, again, there is a clear harm. So, yes, it is a subjective opinion. You're right about that. But it's not the same as ice cream because there is harm being done.
Okay, here it is. I think I have the answer. It is the same as ice cream because there's no right answer in the selection of flavors of ice cream. In the same way, there's no right answer in the selection of subjective moralities.
There's no right answer, but I have my preferences. Yeah.
Again, the person who likes chocolate milk will be like, I just like chocolate, and so I'm going to condemn and criticize anybody who doesn't like chocolate. We think they're silly, they're stupid, they're inconsistent.
Right, because there's no harm being done in someone eating vanilla. That's why. That's why we think it's silly. Because
but
there's
again,
no harm.
the harm being
victim.
done, Alex, is just your flavor.
Well, no, we can observe that there's a person dying, and vast majority of people.
So what?
Because vast majority. Well, first of all, it's illegal. But second, aside from that, vast majority of people think that the loss of innocent life is wrong, versus the vast majority of people don't think that someone.
So morality is based. So the right answer is the majority opinion. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's what we base our laws around generally.
But I'm asking you: is the majority answer the right opinion?
Not necessarily. The point I was just trying to make is that typically I was just trying to say that most people would think it's silly to condemn someone who eats a different flavor of ice cream because most people believe there's no harm being done. Versus with murder, pretty much everyone will believe that there's harm being done. I don't know why.
So the majority, you're saying the people who have the majority opinion, if everybody thought chocolate milk was better than normal milk, then you could rightly criticize the person for drinking normal milk.
No, that's basically your argument. That's not what I'm saying at all.
You're making a majority argument.
No, I literally just said that sometimes I personally will not go with the majority vote. I don't think just because the majority of people believe something that makes it right. 300 years ago, the majority of people believed slavery was okay. I personally believe that's still wrong.
So that means there's no objective reality to most people thinking. Even if I believe most people believe taking innocent life is wrong, but nothing makes that correct. Correct?
Nothing makes what? Say that again?
Nothing makes the majority opinion, just like in the case of the chocolate, if they have a majority opinion that chocolate is the right way to go, nothing actually makes that correct because it's just a preference, it's a subjective preference.
Well, the point I was trying to make with the majority thing is that laws will be written by the values and ethics of the majority, generally speaking. So that's the point I was just trying to make with that.
Whoa. We're not talking about human laws. We're talking about morality.
Okay, yes. But again, what I'm saying is, I feel like we're talking past each other, is the fact that the reason that it would be okay to condemn, or at least most people will be okay with condemning someone for murder, is because they believe that taking innocent life is wrong, versus they would think it's weird. Yes, they have a preference for that. Very strong preference. Versus with eating ice cream, they can't observe any type of victim, so they're not going to condemn that because there's no victim. Is that like not registering or?
No. So you're using language that assumes your conclusion. That was my criticism, is that you were saying there's harm being done. So obviously it's not the same thing. But what I'm trying to probe is that your assumption that harm is wrong should fall into your subjective category. And then what you did was, it's not just my assumption, it's most people's assumption. That's fine. It is most people's assumption. The point I was
trying to make, just to talk about laws. But yes, it is my subjective opinion that murder is wrong. It is also the subjective opinion of 99% of people on the planet. But there's a very small percentage of people who don't think murder is wrong.
But now, let me ask you: is there a correct answer?
Is there a correct answer?
Yeah.
What
is
does that
mean?
Is
there a correct opinion?
What does correct mean? I personally believe that my opinion is correct. A serial killer believes that his opinion is correct.
You're avoiding my question, sir.
Well, I'm trying to explain to you that it's subjective. So technically, no, there's no correct opinion.
Okay, thank you. Just say that. There's no correct opinion. So what that reduces morality down to is preference, like the ice cream. You can say, but there's harm, but you have to recognize that harm is not the correct opinion. That just because it causes harm, it doesn't mean that therefore it's wrong or that it's any different. Harm is just what we attribute to atoms. Well, from your point of view, harm is just what you attribute to a bag of bones and meat colliding with another bag of bone and meat, a bag of atoms colliding with another bag of atoms, and there's some blood. That's all that there is if there isn't any transcendent way to define these things, to arbitrate what's actually right and wrong.
No, there is not, because if there was, then why do you think slavery is wrong?
Just depends what you mean by that.
Like enslaving other human beings as like, and like making them your slaves. Like, what do you mean?
If it's involuntary for the most part, I would say it's wrong, but I'm not going to make a.
You're not sure though about whether slavery is wrong. Like, it seems like you're kind of. I think the clear answer is, of course, slavery is messed up.
You're taking the position of a very modern view of it. Most of the world, for almost all of human history, slavery has existed as a sort of a natural thing. I'm not going to. I have some nuanced views on that. I don't want to. It doesn't matter. It's not really relevant to the.
Well, the reason it is relevant is because I think vast majority of people would agree that slavery is wrong. I mean, you're kind of like having a hard time answering that for some reason. But
well, I believe so. I'll tell you.
In the Bible, they talk about slavery, right? So there's several things in the Bible that we look at where we're like, holy shit, that is like totally messed up, and that would go against most people's moralities.
Yeah, but again, it's just your preference, and it's most people's preference. If you're reducing morality, this is my thesis statement, right? If you're reducing morality down to subjective opinion, it's no different than one trying to claim superiority for their flavor of ice cream. And that's what you're doing. You're trying to claim superiority for your flavor over against someone else's flavor that wants to do harm, that wants to kill, that wants to hurt the innocent. That's all I'm saying. And you can be like, I don't know where you would go from that. I think you should just accept it. There's no correct answer, but I have a correct answer. The Christian.
No, you have what you believe. You have what you believe is the correct answer.
But my belief is rational. I'm rational for believing I have the correct answer.
Bro, there's nothing rational about religion. You're saying that it's the most irrational thing ever to believe in a book that was written 2,000 years ago, full of logical fallacies and holes and a whole bunch of other.
Let's go get into that.
Issues. Well, yeah,
I want to get into the Bible.
Well, I think that's like an important thing. But so you're saying that you're making the argument that me believing that morality is objective is somehow like inconsistent, but like that argument makes no sense. Like most people, I think, accept that. Well, actually, I'm not going to say the most thing. The point I'm going to make is, one, in the Bible, there was a lot of things that were talked about, like slavery, which the vast majority of people now consider immoral. And it seems like you're unwilling to take a strong position on slavery, which is kind of bizarre. And the second thing is that we can see that morality has changed over time. So the question I'll pose to you, if you're saying morality is objective, then why are there serial killers out there? Why are there some people who believe that pedophilia is okay, that murder is okay, that rape is okay? Why do those people exist? If it's objective?
I'll answer you, man. It's called sin.
But there's some people who legitimately believe there's nothing wrong with rape or murder.
Yeah, it's sin.
What does that mean? It's sin. It's sin. Sin is an action.
They're wrong. They're wrong. That's what it means.
But why do they believe that if this stuff is objective?
Because they're sinful. The Bible teaches human beings are depraved. They want to be their own gods. They want to determine right and wrong. When Adam and Eve from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they became like God, knowing good and evil, and they started making decisions, and that's just been the rest of humanity ever since.
But why are there some people born with that? Like, why are there serial killer and psychopaths born who believe there's absolutely nothing wrong with hurting people? Again, if this stuff is objective, sin is an action you commit. So me stealing is a sin. But why are there some people born, literally, who are born to think that there's nothing wrong with murder, rape, blah,
I used to be a big kleptomaniac when I was in high school. I would steal all the time. I would go to shopping stores and steal gum and keyboards and all this crap.
Okay.
Like the objective, subjective terminology that we're using, it's more so for what you can argue for. It's not so much for what people do. It's not so much for behavior. It's more for like having an intellectual foundation for morality.
But that just disputes your whole argument. If morality was objective, then every person would have the same sense of right or wrong. If it was objective,
no,
that's not the case.
Like something, like you would agree, like something can be scientific. Like you would say flat Earth is, incoherent, it's horrible, right? Like terrible view. Just because some people believe that the Earth is flat, it doesn't discredit the arguments for a round Earth, right? Just because there are detractors, it doesn't reflect on the reality.
Right, but we're not talking about the same thing right now. Sure, there's people who have different theories about the earth. We're not talking about theories right now. We're talking about someone's moral code. And there's some people
I'm
who
not
have
arguing that everyone has the same moral code. That's not my argument.
There's some people who have a totally different view of morality. Again, if
Yeah.
God, think about it from a logical perspective. God is trying to create human beings. He wants them to do right or wrong. Why would he just not give everyone the same sense of morals? Why would he make it so some people think that mass murdering people is okay? Like, why would he do that?
I don't think God does that.
So then why are there serial killers on this planet?
Sin.
But you keep saying that. It doesn't answer the question.
Well, I'll tell you how it. So let me clarify just two things. One, I'm not claiming that because morality is objective, which I believe it is, I'm not claiming that therefore everyone, it would be logical that everyone has the same morality. That doesn't follow. The reason it doesn't follow is because of sin. And what I mean by that is the Bible teaches that the human race is corrupted from the inside out and seeks to essentially be their own gods, determining what they want to do and not paying attention to the Creator's will. And so that's why you deviate from Christian morality. That's why every non-Christian deviates from Christian morality for the most part. Well, not, give or take. It's because you want to be your own God. You want to determine your own standards of right and wrong. And that's exactly what the Bible says happens to godless people.
Do you acknowledge there's some people like psychopaths? Do you acknowledge that psychopaths exist?
Yeah.
Okay. You acknowledge that psychopaths think that there's nothing wrong with murder?
I don't know. I think if you ask Ted Bundy if it's wrong to murder, he'd probably tell you it is.
No, a lot of these guys, they think there's absolutely nothing wrong with what they do.
Sure, that's fine. I mean, they're
right.
wrong.
So they have a completely different sense of morality.
So the internals, their conscience is seared, right? Like someone like that, the Bible talks about your conscience. You do enough wrong, you do enough sin, it hardens your heart. You become blinded. You're dull to righteousness. That happens.
But why are these people doing sin in the first place? Why is someone like Ted Bundy going out mass murdering people and someone like me not killing anyone?
I believe that people are, for the most part, born sinners, unlike the other dude that you had on. People are born sinners.
If I was born a sinner, why am I not a serial killer or a rapist?
Oh, because people sin to different degrees, just like people do righteousness to different degrees. You're a Western first world.
So why is Ted Bundy, who's also a Western first world person, born with such a higher level of sin than me? Isn't that unfair?
He worked at it. He watched a lot of pornography.
So do I.
And it warps your mind and it has an effect on your brain. And for him, it just took him to a different place. It took him to a different place than it took you. I mean, you're acting depraved in your own way. So you're just comparing. You're saying, well, other people are more sinners than I am. People are different levels of sinners.
No, the point I'm trying to make is that morality is clearly not objective because, again, there are people who are born have totally different birth.
That doesn't follow, Alex.
Ted Bundy wasn't born of the same level as me. He was born with some serious fucking issues in his brain that caused him to think that murder is okay.
I don't think it's a physical issue. I think it's a spiritual one.
No, they've literally done like MRIs. And
I'm sure there is stuff like that, but you can't take away from the person's decisions. They make the decisions, right? You're responsible for what you do.
Yeah, they should be punished for it, but they weren't born with the same level of, they weren't born the same way I was. They were born with a completely different brain, which caused them to have a completely different moral code. And this can be
can you agree, though, with me that my claim that morality is objective, it doesn't follow from that claim that therefore everyone should have the same sense of morality? Can you agree with me on that? Or you're trying to argue that it should follow?
I think that if morality was objective, then every person would be born with a similar morals or the same morals. Yeah.
I think it's similar enough, like what you said about hurting the innocent. I think that's a principle, a moral law that most people would agree with. So I think there is that remnant of a common ground that humanity shares by virtue of being made in the image of God. We share a certain sense of human life and the dignity of human life. But because of sin, it warps even that. Like people, kill their babies, they kill their neighbors, they kill animals. People are depraved. So you have to factor in, not only is morality objective, human sin is also a reality.
Yeah, the thing is that we don't start off at the same point. Someone like Ted Bundy did not start off if we follow your logic, someone like Ted Bundy did not start off at the same level as I did. if we follow his logic, he
Yeah,
for some reason was born with like 1,000 times more sin than I was. Why would God do
I
that?
can't quantify it.
Why would God put someone on this planet who has way more sin than someone? Doesn't that seem a little unfair to start off like we're doing a race and one person starts off like 10,000 miles behind?
I mean, are you saying that God is responsible for that? Is that what
No,
you're claiming?
I'm just trying to follow your logic and explain it in your world.
It seems like in that objection,
No.
you're assuming that God is responsible for it. Is that what your position
Well,
is?
it seems like you believe that we come from God, and that we are all born with sin. But I'm just trying to say, if we're all born with sin, then why is it that some people are born with way more sin than other people?
Okay, so first of all, I would claim ignorance. I don't know what level of sin anybody is born with. I can't quantify it. I don't know. And if that, let's just say that's true, that we all are born with varying, let's say, inclinations, right? I don't have any inclination to gambling, none at all. But someone else might. And so the question is, well, where do those inclinations and just why is it different for every person? And some people have addictive personalities or alcoholics, whatever. I don't know. I guess, yeah, I don't know why it's the case. It just seems like it's an observable phenomena. But what's the question? Like, what's the criticism here?
Once again, also, by the way, we can continue this convo tomorrow. I gotta end in 10 minutes because I only have an hour tonight. But but so the criticism is that if assuming these premises are true, one, that we were all created by God, and two, that we were all born with sin, then why is it that some people are born with way more sin than others? It seems quite unfair to me, which then throws a wrench in your theory, and I think makes my theory a lot more probable that some people evolve a little differently, and some people are born with some shit that's wrong in their brains, which scientists have already measured and observed.
Well,
that makes a lot more sin than like everyone's just born with sin.
I don't think our positions in this regard are mutually exclusive. It both can be true. God can have made us this way. It also can be the fact that like the means by which, I'm just using your phrase, God made us, was through our natural genetics and biology. I don't think that's mutually exclusive. Both can be true.
Okay, let me flip the question like this. Why are there some people that are born with immense genetic defects and die at the age of 2? Were those people born with more sin? Like, why would God put a really sickly child, a baby on earth who would die at the age of 5 or 6? That person could not have committed any sin.
Yeah, you're talking about the problem of evil, and that's, we're gonna have to give that a lot more attention. But at the end of the day, God is God. And if there are answers to these questions, but at some point you have to just resort back to the fact that if God is God, meaning your creator, the creator of all the world, he is good, loving, etc. If there is something that you believe as a human, limited.
Well, it's not. He's not good and loving if he's creating. He's either a piece of shit or he doesn't exist, because if he was good and loving, he would not be creating little children who suffer for 7 years with a uncurable disease that die at the age of 7 before they can even commit any sin. He would not be creating any of that.
Yeah, and
we would all be born relatively healthy, and then our outcomes would be determined by how we live our lives and what kind of people we are. He would not make very quickly babies who die 4 years in.
Yeah, this was one of the things I wanted to talk about too, was the problem of evil. But I would just comment on, to fit in this time that we have. Your assumption is, if God is loving and good and all this, that therefore it's incompatible with in a world in which suffering exists. That's basically your assumption.
No, it's incompatible with the fact that there are some people who are born who struggle, have pain, and die at the age of 7. Suffering, I can. So, if for example we were all born with like the same whatever type of situation, but some of us at some point in our life, maybe in our 30s, experience some type of hardship. That could be. You can make the argument that's God like kind of testing you, right? But you cannot make the argument that God is testing a little infant who's born with a massive defect who dies 5 years in and spends the first 5 years of his life suffering. That is not God testing someone. That person hasn't even had their brain.
Are you wish that if God existed, that we'd all be like communists and everyone starts at the same place? There's a quality of outcome in the sense of.
I would assume that if God exists and God is a good being, right? He's a whatever. What's the term? What do you guys use?
Benevolent.
That he would not create sickly babies who die, I don't know, 3 months in, 3 years in.
Yeah, but this goes back to our morality, Alex. From your point of view, that's just a preference. That's just a flavor, and you're imposing your flavor onto God. You're
Well,
saying, "Hey, my flavor doesn't really mesh with you, God."
well, I
Or
thought. Well,
you're
I'm trying to operate in your reality. You're saying that
okay.
morality is objective. So do you think it's wrong when babies die, like, or do you think that's
So
okay?
I have two answers to that. If you're operating on my moral ground, you have to operate with all my assumptions. So all my assumptions include the assumption that it is possible for a good God to exist and suffering and evil to happen in the world. That's
But
one of my
why
assumptions.
would this good God create babies who don't even have a chance, who die 3 months in? Why would he do that if he's a good God?
Oh man, I'm just thinking about like how I should go about trying to answer this question. Honestly, I don't know why any individual baby, why if an individual baby has cancer. I don't know why that baby in particular got cancer, and nobody knows. Like we don't know the mind of God,
But
so I
why
don't
would he?
have an answer for that.
Well,
I
of
don't have an
course, you
answer
don't
for
have an answer because it's a massive contradiction. Because if God existed and he was this omnipotent being, then he would not do that.
I don't think so. I don't think that follows.
So why would this good God create babies who have cancer who suffer and die 3 months in?
So I guess I would just push it. There's a lot of answers to this, but my, I guess, initial
There's actually no good answer
supposition
to that.
here
Yeah,
is that God created man good, Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve fell, and that propagated sin into the world.
but that doesn't answer the question. Why is he punishing a baby who hasn't even lived his life yet?
God has the right to give life and to take it
But why is he doing that if he's a good being?
because he has the right to.
So if I have the right to, I don't know, shoot you, that's okay. Like that.
If you had the right, yes. If you had the right to shoot me, then you could shoot me because you have the right.
But that would be okay.
If you had the right, that's the
So
key thing.
if I lived 150 years ago, where I had the right to own slaves, that would be okay.
It's a little tough.
Well, it's actually
use
really
use a different example.
Okay.
Use a different example.
I have, let me try to think of another one. If I have the right to, okay, let's just say you give me, you say, hey man, something like this. I say, hey man, can I borrow $10,000? You're like, sure, because we're friends. I have your money, but we don't have any kind of contract or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I technically have the right not to give it to you because there's no agreement. That would make it okay that I don't give it the money back to you.
Oh, like return it? Like you don't have the right to?
Yeah, I could technically at that point, since we don't have any kind of contract, I have the right to keep your money, but that wouldn't make it okay.
So I would agree that you have no legal obligation to give it back, but I would say you still have a moral obligation.
And I would say God has a moral obligation not to have babies.
But why are you the one determining what's moral? What's the moral obligation?
Why am I the one determining that?
Yeah.
So I should live in a world where like random babies die? Like that's a better sense of morality?
Either it's the case, Alex, either God determines what's moral and seemingly, like, again, I never ascribe evil to God in that he does evil directly, but he did create a world in which he knew that evil would happen, right?
If he's the creator and he's creating situations where babies born with cancer die 3 months in, then he is an evil God. Because that's an evil action.
So again, in my world,
unless you personally don't think it's evil for babies to die 3 months in, unless you think that that's not evil.
I mean, it's tragic.
You have to buy. So you don't think that's evil? You think that's like okay that
it's no, it's tragic. It's I guess I just want to say evil is when you're like someone's intending to do wrong. I think that's more specifically evil. This is more so like tragic.
If God is omnipotent or whatever,
yeah,
and he has all power, then he did have the intent that baby died. It didn't just happen accidentally. So therefore, he's either an evil God or he doesn't exist.
I don't think. Again, I just don't think that that follows. If you're gonna step into my worldview, if you're gonna step onto my platform, you have to take all my assumptions along with them. And so, if you're gonna believe in God, you can't come to that conclusion.
Yeah. Well, if I'm looking from an outside perspective, I'm thinking, okay, there's this omnipotent being who controls everything. And in the Bible it says that murder is wrong or whatever, right? So there's some evidence for that. And I personally believe murder is wrong. And then I see a situation where there's little babies who are born with insane genetic defects and die 3 months in, then yeah, it's like I would look at that and I would say, one, either the God doesn't exist and it was purely random, which is the theory that I would come to, or two, God is evil. He's actually a piece of shit who's causing harming to other people. Right?
There's a third option.
What, that he just wasn't looking that day, or what?
No. The third option is just that your perspective is flawed, and you have to humble yourself before God.
Well, my perspective is the death of innocent babies is wrong. Is that not your perspective?
Yeah, it's my perspective too. Yeah.
Okay, so then what's the difference? You think it's wrong, I think it's wrong, but God is doing it. So,
but I don't think that inflicts any fault on God, and that's what I'm criticizing you for trying to do.
Well, if he's omnipotent, then yes, it does. If he controls everything.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't follow. I don't think it follows.
So it's okay. So let's just say, I don't know, I'm like a dictator of America, right? I have supreme power. I can do whatever the fuck I want, and I just start killing people at random. Some people I kill, some people I don't kill. Like, that's like, well, you know, you have the right. Like, you're technically the dictator. Like, that would make it okay? Of course not. So just apply that same type of logic.
But the problem with the analogy, Alex, is that the dictator still is underneath the law of God. But God is God, and it sounds like I'm
your argument
creating a
for
special
God
category for God. But
you are.
He is in a special category. He is God, is he
Well,
not?
the rules of morality don't need to apply to him, right? Basically. So it's wrong when we murder babies, but it's not wrong when God murders babies.
But see, okay, I like that you said that. He's not murdering the babies.
Well, if he's omnipotent, he's creating a situation where they're born with a massive
right, and that's not the same thing as actually murdering the baby. Would you
so
agree?
So then why are the babies born with a massive genetic defect? If it's not God, why is that happening?
Let's just say, like, why does anything bad happen? Well, ultimately, it's in the will of God, right? It's
so
you can go back to the will of God.
Why is God doing that? How's that? So if he's this good omnipotent being, then why is he why is he causing evil into the world? Like, this just makes no sense.
Yeah, I don't think. I guess my only response or answer to this is just to say that you're not able to find a way to make it logically compatible that God can exist and evil can exist. You're just saying that must be a contradiction, and all I can say to you is it doesn't have to be a contradiction. And if you look into it, doesn't have to be.
If he's not like omnipotent, omnivalent, then yeah, it would not be a contradiction, because it could be something else that's causing. Like, if God, did a few things, right? Like, maybe he doesn't really like fuck with things too much. He has some power, but he doesn't have all power. Then yeah, you could make this say, but well, God created the earth, but he doesn't have the power to affect how people are born. But you guys believe that God is completely omnivalent, like omnipotent. He controls everything. So therefore, yes, if he has control of the matter, then he is choosing. If he has control over how people are born, then he's choosing that these babies are born with a genetic defect. That is being done by choice. And you and I both think that is evil.
No.
You don't think it's evil when babies die?
I don't think it's evil for God to decree evil. I don't think it's evil for God to create a world for his purposes that involves evil and suffering. And I believe that the things themselves, from our point of view, they are wrong. And even in terms of what God says, like, do not murder, that's also wrong. It grieves God's heart when people sin. It grieves God's heart
when bad
things happen.
So why is he doing bad things himself? Why is he sinning? Why is he causing natural disasters that kill people through no fault of their own? Why is he causing babies to be born? Why is he causing little children to be molested? People who are innocent. You can make the argument that, like, okay, if something bad happens to a bad person, okay, like maybe like that's God punishing them. That's fine. But why are innocent people having to experience these horrible, horrible things? You then have to bite the bullet and say the laws of morality and what is right or wrong doesn't apply to God. He can just do whatever the fuck he wants, and just right and wrong doesn't apply to him.
Yeah. If you're going to try to say that, if you're going to believe in God and you're going to try to say, yeah, it's wrong for God to create a world in which evil occurs, you are basically saying that you have all the moral knowledge to impose onto God. And I would just say you don't. And I would like to continue this, though. I think this deserves more attention.
Yeah, we continue. I do got a dip. But yeah, we can continue the convo. We'll just coordinate over text. But yeah, Matt, thanks for coming on. It was a pretty decent discussion, I think. So
Yeah, good. I look forward to more
discussion. All right, buddy. Have a good one, man. All right, guys. Have a good
See ya.
night. I'll catch you all tomorrow.